So, you've made some progress in Megabonk, but are still having a bit of trouble in tiers 2, 3, and into the final swarm. We get it. Megabonk is a hard game, and it can be easy to lose yourself in the difficulty curve before your build can really start to flourish. If that's you, then don't worry, we've got you covered. Here are some of our tips to get you to a busted build and maybe even a spot on the leaderboard. Alright, before we get into it, quick disclaimer, there's a lot of subjective takes right now on what truly counts as S tier to reach those God mode runs. Megabonk is still pretty new, with tweaks and balances still on the horizon, which means that there's not really the one meta outside of a few tomes that are agreeably mandatory. The good news is that this means there's enough breadth and variety for you to keep every run fresh while fishing for those leaderboard runs. Quick shout out to content creators like Baby Smooth and Dex who are experimenting and highlighting some of the busted builds they encounter, and the Megabonk subreddit as the community figures out the game together and disseminates the info. Right, let's talk weapons. While there's no one weapon that is better than the rest, there are a couple you should consider contenders to fit busted builds. Keep in mind you'll want to pick weapons that will synergize with the stat boosts and tomes you pick during a run, but more on that later. Currently, there are many people using the Dexecutioner as one of their main weapons, as it has the ability to instantly execute enemies. With more projectiles, higher attack speed, and size, the Dexecutioner has the potential to deal serious damage and insta-kill a ton of enemies. Likewise, both Aura and Flamewalker can benefit greatly from similar stat boosts. While these are certainly more passive or defensively minded weapons, pairing it with an offensive weapon like the Dexecutioner can make it so you rarely ever get touched. In that same vein, you'll often see some players opt for Aegis for one of their slots, as it allows for higher survivability. If you're someone who likes having defensive options and like using Aegis, consider focusing attack speed to make sure you've always got more shields ready to go. For truly busted builds, however, you're gonna want to focus weapons that have the ability to deal multi-hit damage. We've already mentioned Flamewalker, but some offensive choices I've seen floated around are the Axe and the Black Hole. While these can be tough to get started, proccing multiple hits to as many enemies at once as you can is the most optimal for long-term survivability. Combining these with a weapon like Dice, which has the ability to increase your crit chance, is a great way to deal huge stacks of damage. Axe in particular is also a great weapon to choose if you're someone who likes using a size tome to get a weapon storm around your character. And speaking of storms, we have to mention both Bananarang and Katana here. Pairing these with a size tome can guarantee both high amounts of damage as well as stacks of efficient damage. Lastly, I've seen some arguments about Shotgun, Lightning Staff, and Revolver being contenders for powerful builds, but it's worth noting I've seen less evidence of that in both my experience using these weapons and in some of the videos of leaderboard runs online. Obviously, feel free to pick up whichever weapons you like using, but keep in mind, you're gonna want to choose weapons that synergize with your other weapons, and proccing multi-hits as well as your tomes. And speaking of tomes, if there's any current meta that makes or breaks a good run, it's these two: the Luck Tome and the XP Tome. While the Luck Tome will increase the odds of you getting higher rarity upgrades, weapons, and items, the XP Tome will make it so you rank up faster and more often. If you want to make it far into a run, these are straight up essential. The next tome I've seen thrown around a lot is the Curse Tome. This tome increases enemy difficulty, quantity, health, speed, and strength. While this of course makes the game harder, more enemies and more elites means more XP. More XP means more levels. And more levels means more upgrades. If you're confident in your ability to get a run going, consider this as your third tome. While your final tome spot will of course vary on which weapon and character you choose, there are a couple that stand out above the others. Damage Tome is a great pickup if you're not having luck finding a red credit card. More on that later. Precision Tome can be useful if you can't grab dice on your run, though there are passive ways to increase your crit anyway. Quantity Tome is also amazing to get more projectiles, but it perhaps is outshined by the Cooldown Tome, which increases your attack speed. There are two reasons why attack speed might be better than quantity. The first is that there are upgrades you can get to increase the amount of projectiles with one of your weapons when you level up. But perhaps the better reason is that you simply want less time when you're not attacking enemies, as having a high amount of projectiles does not diminish the time in between attacks. When you get into the late waves, you're gonna want to be attacking as often as possible. Quick shout out to the Chaos Tome here, as I've seen some people online swear by it. But there's also a big amount of RNG that plays into this tome being beneficial for a busted run. The next thing you want to consider is your character. While there isn't a best character, as the leaderboard is somewhat diverse with what people are choosing, it's good to keep in mind both the starting weapon with your character as well as their passive. Take Bandit for example. He gets the Executioner as his starting weapon, but it's his passive that can get him really strong, especially if you make it into longer runs, as his attack speed goes up with every level. Ninja is great for those that want to pair Katana with an Executioner and double up on executions, while Monk and Spaceman are really great for those that want to focus on size builds. You're honestly pretty free to pick whichever passive you feel is going to synergize with the build you aim to make on a run, but perhaps the most broken character so far is Dice Head. His passive is that he gets a random stat upgraded with each level up. Pairing him with an XP tome and high difficulty with the right weapons can get you to some really high levels. And high levels means high stats, means busted runs. Last thing we need to touch on before hopping into strategies is items. There are a couple you want to be keeping an eye out for. I already mentioned this one earlier, but red credit card is possibly one of the best in the game. This item will increase your damage by 2.5% every time you open a chest. And since items stack, having multiple of this item can pretty much ensure you become unstoppable, especially if you find a blue microwave and start copying red credit cards. If you can't find this one, then the next best item in the damage category in the short term is the gym sauce. The other credit card to look out for is the green credit card, which increases your luck by 2.5% every time you open a chest. Getting one of these early is a great way to passively build up your luck if you're having trouble finding a luck tome. Likewise, a clover item can be good in the short term to start building up your luck percentage. Quick shout out to the time bracelet as another short term item to get you to start building up XP if you're not having luck grabbing the XP tome early. Some higher rarity items to keep an eye out for are the beefy ring, demonic blade, demonic blood, and demonic soul. Pairing the beefy ring with a character like Monk can be a long-term investment to higher damage, as Monk's passive increases his total HP per level up. Likewise, having a high crit weapon like Dice pairs nicely with demonic blade, as this item has the chance to heal you every time you deal crit damage. And demonic blood and demonic soul will each increase your total HP and damage the more kills you get respectively. But perhaps the best items you can get are these legendary items. Out of all of these, the one you definitely want to get as early as possible, RNG willing, is the anvil. This item will make it so that each weapon level up will include one additional stat bonus. Pairing this item with a luck tome can make it so you get the most out of each and every weapon reward, getting you to deal the most amount of damage in the least amount of time. Some others to look out for are the giant fork, where your crits become mega crits, the sucky magnet, which periodically drags in all XP for you passively, the big bunk, which will deal 20 times damage, and the Zawarudo, which slows down time if you take damage that would otherwise kill you. If this item goes off, then you know it's time to get out of there and on to the next tier stage. Quick note here that you want to ensure you've got a couple of upgrades covered in the shop. Toggler is good to have unlocked, as you can remove some weapons, items, and tomes you know you won't use in a run. While Refresh and Banish are great for both rerolling what upgrades you get, as well as removing them from the RNG pool altogether. Alright, now that we're actually in a stage, the single most important advice we can give to set yourself up for busted runs is, oddly enough, to try and not grab items and shrine rewards early. The reason for this is because you want to try and level up and grab either an XP tome or luck tome first. Doing this will ensure that the first chests and shrines you grab will have better rewards than if you otherwise ran straight to them at the start of the run. The best way to hold off as long as possible is to strike a balance between finding or upgrading the right tome and dealing as much damage as possible. To do this, you're better off selecting a second weapon earlier as opposed to upgrading the weapon you start out with, as dealing quantitative amounts of damage in the opening 2 to 3 minutes is better than dealing qualitative. Of course, if you're having trouble surviving, then sure, grab a chest or two, as you want to keep yourself just above the difficulty curve and set yourself up for success long term. And speaking of difficulty curve, the next thing to keep in mind is how greedy you want to be on a run. Many God mode runs, if they're not picking up the curse tome, will walk around the map hitting the skull markers and the curse shrines to increase the difficulty. As mentioned earlier, more enemies means more XP, means more levels. Prioritize XP tome before the luck tome in some of these cases to make sure you're getting more levels. Really, how your run pans out from here is a mix of what build you're trying to go for, as well as the RNG the game provides. Be smart and selective with which upgrades you choose at the right time. Spending too many upgrades on a bunch of different tomes might mean you neglect some weapon upgrades and have a potentially good run end prematurely. To that effect, don't be afraid of restarting if you feel like the run isn't going your way. Finding some key items early can be big, but if you're 5 or 7 minutes in and still barely hanging on, it might be a good sign to start from scratch. A good rule of thumb to keep in mind is your level when leaving a stage. I've noticed that being above level 50 when completing tier 1 is a pretty good sign a run is going well. And since the XP tome can have exponential benefits, completing tier 2 around levels 200 to 500 is a great indicator that tells you just how far you can push a run. If you're around 200, then you'll clear tier 3 no problem, but might struggle with the boss a little bit. But if you're around 500, then you should have no problem one-shotting the boss and continuing into the final swarm. From then on, it's just about playing smart and being selective with your upgrades to maximize your XP returns and your weapon damage. And those are some of our tips for Megabonk. Let us know if we missed anything. Like I said, there's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to deciding what constitutes as God potential and what is less than ideal. Feel free to share any tips or comment your thoughts you have down below. Good luck on your leaderboard runs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.